Ladies and gentlemen, the 2024 U.S.-China-Hong Kong Forum is a bilingual event in both English and Chinese. Simultaneous interpretation headsets are available for checkout in the lobby. Now, please take your seats. Our event is beginning.
Right after him, I'll introduce Mr. B. Right after him, I'll introduce James. Yep. Then I'm out of here for a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our event is beginning.
Welcome to the US-China-Hong Kong Forum, the leading bilateral meeting today and home to ideas, debate and dialogue. Our work is supported by a community of global leaders, including heads of state and government of major economies, from Japan to Canada and Italy to Singapore. Our annual meeting has featured Muhammad Yunus and José Ramos Horta, both winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. The Hong Kong Forum is presented by QCEF, the China United States Exchange Foundation, and CCIEE, the China Center for International Economic Exchanges. QCEF was founded on a dream that tomorrow will be better than today, a promise made by our founder and Hong Kong's first chief executive, Mr. Tung Chee-hwa. He believes that the US and China unlock the power and potential of humanity. In trying times, QCEF moves momentum forward through our innovative programs in 4 areas: dialogue, education, culture, and the global goals. At our core, we champion and elevate the voice of young people, so when they speak, they are also heard, and when they're heard, they participate and contribute. 45 years of the modern US-China relationship has propelled us into an era of peace, prosperity, and progress. Now, as we look to the next 45 years, we have an opportunity to draw on this experience, discover what really matters, and secure the global future. Thank you for your commitment and for joining us on this journey.
From a very early stage, I set this dream to make China good, to continue to be very interested in the United States of America, and try to bring the 2 countries together. And I told my family, if I have to crawl, I would do it every day of my life to make US-China better.
Ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you to the 5th US-China-Hong Kong Forum, Mr. John Zhao, Chairman of QCEF, the China United States Exchange Foundation.
Good morning, friends. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 5th US-China-Hong Kong Forum. It's really wonderful to see all of you here, and it's definitely my honor to open this forum up. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank our co-host, CCIEE, and its chairman, Mr. Bi Jingquan. We're gathering here at an important moment, just 10 days after the very consequential US presidential election. Already, alarms sounded louder with each cabinet appointment announcements by the president-elect, Mr. Trump. Dialogue and cooperation between peoples of US and China at all levels are more important than ever. I think we all agree to this point. This forum serves as a platform for open, honest, and constructive conversations that aim to foster mutual understanding and develop mutual trust. This is our opportunity to contribute to a peaceful and constructive US-China relationship. As we embark on these discussions under the heading of reflection and forecast, let us remember that our goal is not only to address the challenges and complexities we face, but also to explore the vast opportunities for collaboration. So I invite you to engage fully in the sessions ahead. I look forward to what we will all accomplish together over the next 2 days and beyond. Again, thanks for being here and being part of the Hong Kong Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhao. We now welcome Mr. Bi Jingcuan, Chairman of CCIEE, the China Center for International Economic Exchanges.
尊敬的赵令欢主席，各位嘉宾、女士们、先生们，大家上午好！很高兴再次来到香港，与香港中美交流基金会合作举办香港中美论坛。今年是中美建交45周年。1周前，美国总统选举尘埃落定，习近平主席致电唐纳德·特朗普前总统当选美国第47任总统。习近平主席指出，历史昭示我们，中美合则两利，斗则俱伤。一个稳定、健康、可持续发展的中美关系，符合两国共同利益和国际社会期待。希望双方秉持相互尊重、和平共处、合作共赢的原则，加强对话沟通，妥善管控分歧，拓展互利合作，走出一条新时期中美正确相处之道，造福两国，惠及世界。中美关系是世界上最重要的双边关系之一，攸关两国人民的福祉和人类前途命运。45年前，两国领导人以超凡的政治智慧，做出了中美建交的战略抉择，推动了中美关系发展，促进了亚太和全球的稳定与繁荣。中美建交始于中国改革开放之初，45年来，基于比较优势和市场选择，两国形成了结构高度互补、利益深度交融的互利共赢关系。1979年到2023年，中美两国货物贸易额从25亿美元增长到6600多亿美元，双向直接投资攀升到1800多亿美元。中国是美国32个州的前3大出口市场，对华出口为美国创造了93万个就业岗位，近8万家美国企业在华投资，近90%在华的业务实现了盈利。两国缔结了286对友好省州和友好城市关系。中美合作共同应对气候变化、恐怖主义、网络安全等全球性挑战。稳定的中美关系为亚太和全球带来了和平的发展环境。尽管中美关系发展中历经风云变幻，甚至严峻的挑战，但无论从维护两国人民的福祉，还是为维护全球经济稳定，都需要有健康稳定的中美关系作为支撑。我们希望两国在相互尊重的基础上，坚持通过对话、磋商和谈判，妥善解决问题，管控分歧。我们希望两国推动农产品、能源、医药、金融、 等传统领域的合作，探索数字经济、先进制造、绿色低碳等新兴领域的合作。我们希望两国加强应对气候变化、网络安全、公共健康等多边领域的国际合作，共同推动全球产业链、供应链的安全和韧性，共同维护以联合国为核心的多边合作机制。中国发展的任务还十分繁重，我们有14亿人口，生活在农村的人口还有5亿人，在城市工作但还没有完全融入城市的人口还有近2亿人。无论世界风云如何变幻，中国都要坚定不移地做好自己的事。我们要按照中共20届三中全会的部署，把全面深化改革、推进中国式现代化的要求落到实处。要进一步完善社会主义市场经济体制，把充分发挥市场配置资源的决定性作用，更好发挥政府的作用的要求落实到经济工作的各个方面。要推进价格改革，理顺公用事业、教育、医疗服务价格，完善主要由市场供求决定要素价格的机制，减少政府对价格的不当干预。要加强产权和知识产权的保护，推进科技创新，带动产业创新，完善体制机制，促进优质资源向新质生产力集聚。要稳步扩大制度性开发，主动对接国际高标准经贸规则，在产权保护、产业补贴、环境标准、劳动保护、政府采购、电子商务、金融领域等实现规则、规制、管理标准相通相融，打造透明、稳定、可预期的制度环境。要建立全国统一大市场，规范执法行为，营造法治化、市场化、国际化的一流营商环境。唯有破除束缚生产力发展的体制机制障碍，为市场主体创造更多的投资机会，为年轻人创造更多的就业机会，不断增强国内外投资者的信心，才能在国际风云变幻中赢得主动。最后，预祝香港中美论坛取得圆满成功，谢谢大家。
Thank you, Mr. B. Now, please join me in welcoming Mr. James Chow, President of QCEF and World Health Organization Goodwill Ambassador.
Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the US-China-Hong Kong Forum is not a conference but an annual working meeting where people can contribute to the greatest relationship, and they meet here in this international center for finance, commerce, and the arts. We proudly call Hong Kong our home. In the past 12 months, the outcomes of this meeting have continued to unfold. First, we achieved a rare expression of unity when the forum was opened last year by Ambassador谢锋and Ambassador Nicholas Burns and President José Ramos Horta, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. Second, we supported a dialogue between retired generals and admirals that resulted in a restart of military communications, a breakthrough announced by President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden in San Francisco. And third, we became the first organization to bring an American college delegation to China after the two leaders made that commitment to expand educational exchanges. This is our impact and this is our story. But that story continues today with your help. As president of QCEF, I made a promise that we'll build on that vision by increasing the voice of women, the voice of young people, and the voice of more countries who are important global stakeholders. You will see us today make good on that promise. Not only do we have more women in leadership roles represented at this forum and the first ever youth program attached to this annual meeting, but also speakers from Europe, Asia, Latin America, and Africa. In fact, over 60% of our speakers this year are new, proof of our celebration of different perspectives and diverse ways of life. We also welcome new partners, such as the World Economic Forum attending the meeting here for the first time, and we're deeply honored to have representatives from 3 US presidential families. The families of President Richard Nixon, who broke the silence during the height of the Cold War, the family of President Jimmy Carter, who normalized relations with Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, and of course President George H.W. Bush, and I suppose you could also say President George W. Bush, whose enduring vision mirrors our own love for the American and Chinese people. This Hong Kong Forum recognizes multiple milestones: 45 years of normalization, 1 year since the San Francisco vision, and 10 days since the US presidential election. QCEF and CCIEE invites you to shape the global future together. Lastly, nobody is more important to us than Mr. Tong Chihua, our founder and chairman emeritus, whose legacy of service we always strive to aspire to. Well, nearly half a century since the creation of modern US-China ties, international leaders are joining now in conversation to stocktake on the 45 years gone by, the 45 years ahead, and the points of collaboration that could save and improve the most consequential relationship of our times. We also promise less speeches this year, so we're going to kick off with a high-level dialogue where we have all of these leaders in concert, locked in conversation. Joining us as our moderator, we're delighted to have with us Dr. Victor Fung, who is the Vice Chairman of QCEF and Chairman of the Fung Group. His panelists will be Ambassador Charlene Barszewski, Chair of the National Committee on US-China Relations, and of course, the 12th United States Trade Representative. Vice Minister Lu Kang from the International Department of the CPC Central Committee. We're extremely grateful that you join us here in Hong Kong today, as we are also His Excellency President Boris Tadic, the first President of the Republic of Serbia, and also Mr. Joseph Tai, a great leader in business and chairman of the Alibaba Group. Please welcome all of you to the stage.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to actually be moderator of this session. First of all, I really think it is a great moment for us to host this meeting, and I'm especially proud that this meeting is taking place in Hong Kong. I think, having had a lot to do with the US-China relations for QCEF over the years, this is really a very important moment. Really for us to really think through. The US-China relations is, I think, without doubt in my mind, the most important bilateral relationship in the world. However, I think beyond being so important to the two countries, obviously, I think it is also a huge impact on the rest of the world. And especially for us in the private sector, in the business sector, I can tell you this is perhaps the most important thing that we take account of and must take account and really examine in everything that we do today. So I think to explore this relationship, I think we have a very distinguished panel that we have already been introduced. So this is well known to you, and I won't go into further introductions. So let me launch right into our discussion. Charlene, perhaps we can start with you. You have actually been perhaps the person with the most history on this panel about the US-China relations. Your work starting from, the 1990s or even before that, and especially in my memory, Charlene's contribution to really China's entry to the WTO is a milestone event in my mind for the world. So, Charlene, can you actually start off by giving us some historic perspective over the last 45 years, and especially distilling from that some of the key lessons that I think we have to keep in mind as we go forward to the next 45 years. Charlene?
Thank you.
Right here, sorry.
There we are. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. It's particularly wonderful to see so many friends, both up here and in the audience. Special thank you to our hosts today. And may I also, if you would indulge me, just say that Tung Chi-Hua was very important to me personally, an advisor, a friend, someone who had endless good sense, common sense, and a friend, as you saw, of the U.S.-China relationship. So my heartfelt thanks to him as well. You know, thinking about the U.S.-China relationship and going back in time feels like a very long time ago now. At the time, of course, in the early 90s, China had a population of 1.3 billion people, the world's largest standing army, a nuclear power, a country that was beginning to open up on the basis of extraordinary reform put in place by Deng Xiaoping, and a country that wanted to engage with the world in a way not really seen before. In the 1990s, the early 90s, we took all of that and thought, what a wonderful thing to capture this remarkable country, to capture these reforms and opening, and to bring the two countries together, to bring China, help bring China into the global community on a rules-based, market-oriented system. And so we embarked on that project. As you well know, we talked many times about it.
Yes.
And China made extraordinary changes to get into the WTO. And then this reform and opening expanded, deepened. Its scope became very, very broad, and the entire world benefited. There's no question that the globalization of that period brought extraordinary wealth, extraordinary decreases in global poverty, and such. And over time, it was presumed these positive trends would continue. But many things intervened along the way. 2008 financial crisis was a seminal moment, calling into question the Western model. China itself began something of a U-turn from integration toward something rather different. The US began to pull back from its classic leadership role and anchor of the international system. And many other features of the global economy began to change, putting great stress on the bilateral relationship and stress on the original decisions that were so welcoming to China. There are many things we can say about the current situation, but none, I think, more important than the two countries must find a way to get back on track. It's in the best interests of both countries, of the people of both countries, of the world, for stability, for business, and for peace.
Thank you, Charlene. You know, getting back on track, I think is going to be an important question that all of us would discuss. You know, I, for one, have really thought that this bilateral relationship over the last 45 years has done tremendous good for the world. You know, really, if you think about for America, for China, for the rest of the world, we have all benefited. What was the turning point? And what actually made it turn to maybe a situation that we're kind of witnessing today? And maybe if we can understand that, and we can actually go back to think about how we might actually, using your words, put the relationship back on track. Where was the turning point? What were the factors then in your mind?
I think the factors were many. China's move toward self-sufficiency, its move to elevate the role of national security above economic policy, its move toward a more ideological basis of exchange rather than a pragmatic basis of exchange. On the US side, deep financial and other problems. The effect of the financial crisis really can't be overstated because it took 10 years for the economy to actually recover and to put people back where they were. A feeling on the part of many in the United States they never got back to where they were, and that somehow globalization and China were to blame for that. Where globalization had been a net positive, it was viewed as a net negative. Where China had been admired, it was viewed as harboring interests antithetical to those of the United States. And of course, a world situation that has become very unstable. The effect of Russia's actions in Ukraine, the Middle East, of course, the South China Sea, the East China Sea. There are many different flashpoints that have emerged into what already was becoming a more populist, nationalistic move on the part of both the United States and China. I don't know that there was any one turning point, but a confluence of all of these issues really found their home in the US-China relationship. I should add one other thing, which is, and I've often thought about this, how did China lose America? How did it lose America? And I think the difference in ambition, the difference in expectation, the move toward not just self-sufficiency, but publicly endorsing a dominance is the word used, of the technologies of the future, of the technologies of future growth, turned economic engagement and integration not into a stabilizing force, but into an absolute rivalry, an adversarial situation. The US, rather than embarking on a program to understand these changes, to work with China, to perhaps understand those differences of competitive and other areas, and come up with a modus vivendi, come up with a way to move toward entente, the US instead started a trade war. This was entirely unproductive, the effect of which was a failure on economic grounds for the United States and the US economy, and of course, only exacerbated the situation that already existed. So I don't think there was one point. I think there were many points. And I think each side believes the other was the perpetrator. Yep. And this has created this very negative dynamic which, as I said, and you reiterated, of course, in your opening, really must stop. Because, as Henry Kissinger said, and I know we're honoring him later, the U.S. must recognize the permanence of China. China must recognize the permanence of the United States. And therefore, there is no alternative, certainly no alternative we want to contemplate, other than coexistence. So we must find a way to achieve that coexistence.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Charlene. That really puts it in perspective. You know, the way you've summarized it is the U.S.-China relations today has become, you know, really a multi-dimensional, very complex, non-zero-sum game. And I think the way, the attitude of how the two respective players actually participate in this non-zero-sum game is crucial. That we cannot really play this as a zero-sum game and downward spiral. But I really, and there are many multiple complex factors that one has to study and unwind before we can put it back on the right track, in your words. But I'd like to put on record, before we go on to the next speaker, that even with this as the backdrop, the economy, as Mr. B pointed out, the economic development, and indeed even the trade relations between the two countries have continuing. I, for one, you know, and many of us in the business world would see U.S. still as the world's largest market. And the relationship with U.S. companies and multinationals around the world, including China, you know, with other, you know, local companies and so on, is still one of the most important aspects of the global economy. So, in a sense, I'd like to just put on record that we have been able to actually progress the economic side despite this relationship. But I have to tell you, there's a huge opportunity loss because the relationship is not better. If it can be better, we will be actually progressing even so much more. So maybe let me turn to you, Minister Liu. You know, and thank you very much for your presence today. You know, I'd like to perhaps have you start off to talk a little bit about your department, international department, in this CCP Central Committee, just for the perspective. But I think I really like to draw on your expertise in you know, your stint in as head of the as director of the North China Department, which is the U.S. In my mind, you are the key person focusing on this important, you know, bilateral relationship. And the real question I think that Charlene raised, I think is in today's world, we may be thinking about economic development, but at the same time, we cannot ignore the factor of security. How do you really balance between the need for economic development and security? And do we need some rules, some bounds? Maybe we can get the benefit of your thinking.
Thank you very much, Victor, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to catch up with all of you who have been committed to this very important bilateral relationship. I have to say that we thank you very much, appreciate the invitation for the representative from IDCPC, the International Department of the Chinese Communist Party, to be at this forum. This department, IDCPC, actually is an external branch of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. And basically, what we are doing is to explore and reach out through the party-to-party channel. And so far, we have already set up party-to-party channels with, in various forms with our partners. I mean, more than 600 political parties in more than 160 countries, including both the Democrats and the Democratic and the Republican in the United States. I should say thank you for the good question. And in answering that, I would also like to address a little bit what you have raised with Ambassador Barshevsky. It's very important when we look into the future prospect of China-US bilateral relationship. it's always very important to draw upon experience from the past. And when you ask the Ambassador Barshevsky what could be the turning point of the trajectory, when she said no, I also had the answer in my mind. And maybe there was no specific turning point on that, especially on part of China. If you look back to the past half century or past 45 years ever since our diplomatic ties, everybody knows that there were ups and downs. There were even crises. We have the two former Chinese ambassadors to the US here. Both of them were my bosses and are still my mentors. And so both of them did experience some of the very difficult moments in the history of this bilateral relationship. Anyhow, I think we were fortunate. Both sides will try to manage that and try to, as Ambassador Barshevsky said, try to get this important bilateral relationship back to the track. But today, many of my interlocutors told me that we are in a totally different situation. I agree with that. But what's the turning point? When Ambassador Barshevsky said no, there might be no, I think on the part of China, that could also be our answer. Because when we look back, it's my understanding China's basic approaches, general approaches to this bilateral relationship basically has remained unchanged. Let me just name a very few. For example, from the very beginning, China's focus on our development at home, I mean the economic development, technological progress, and our national rejuvenation have never changed. That has our focus from the very beginning, no matter what happened at home and abroad and worldwide. So in that context, we have always preferred the United States to being our partners. I can assure you that's still the case for the time being today. Second, China's determination to preserve our core interests along through the development of the evolution of this bilateral relationship also have never been changed. So many people are talking about whether China is becoming more and more assertive on the cross-strait relationship. I think for all those who have been on this bilateral relationship are not unfamiliar with China's attitude from the very beginning on the Taiwan issue. I don't think you are unfamiliar with China's zero tolerance with the separatist moves, forces on the island, and for those external forces condoning that. That's still the case today. Third, for example, China's commitment to the existing multilateral framework have never been changed. Whenever we made the promise, we tried to carry out our obligations. And alongside China's development and our reform at home and opening to the outside, you can find that China is trying our best to align ourselves with the existing rules and frameworks. As Mr. B said in his opening remark, if you look at the decision adopted by the third plenary of the Central Committee of the CPC, you can see that now we are even trying to carry out institutional opening up, even at this very difficult juncture. And he has already outlined a lot of specific areas where we try to meet with the high standards, international standards. But I also have to say that it's very disturbing. Some of the designers of the existing rules or frameworks are now turning their back on what has become the general agreement, for example, as Ambassador Barshevsky just mentioned, on free trade issues. And fourth, I have to say that China's commitment to maintain a stable, healthy, sustainable China-US bilateral relationship have never been changed. In spite of all those difficult periods and the difficulties we are still having now, between China and the US, you know that we have so many issues almost every day. I think we have tried our best to properly manage all those difficulties and try to forge a kind of joint efforts for the benefits not only for our two peoples, but the public worldwide. But I have to say that that's still our wish. You can read that from the readout of the San Francisco Summit meeting last year, and you can read that from the congratulatory message from President Xi to President-elect Donald Trump, as read out by Mr. B just now. But I also have to say that it takes two to tango. And we wish for the good. On this, I think there are many emerging issues, as Victor, you just described. For example, how to strike a balance at the security issue and the economic development issue. I think that both of them are very important for any government, for any country. In China, President Xi already said that we should strike at a good balance, equilibrium of security, national security, and economic development. You cannot just compromise either, but you should make either to be more supplementary or complementary to the other. So basically, that's our approach. I think that's still the attitude on the Chinese side. In concluding, I think I'm exhausting the 5 minutes, but in concluding, may I just quote a very, very small conversation. Yesterday, before my departure for Hong Kong from Beijing, I learned from the weather broadcaster there are 4 typhoons approaching this part of China.
We've never had this before.
So I became a little bit worried whether my flight and the flights for all the distinguished guests will be on schedule. But safely, I was accompanied Ambassador Cui Tiankai, my former boss. Our plane landed very safely and smoothly. So in my conversation, in my chat with the acting chief executive yesterday afternoon, I congratulated him on good luck. He said that Hong Kong actually often experiences this kind of storm or whatever. And of course, we should wish for good luck, but it was lucky that this time Hong Kong did not suffer. But actually, the Hong Kong SAR government also made a lot of preparations, keep people alert on that. So I think he's good. He's right. We can always wish for good, but we cannot just rely on fortune. Yeah. We should just do the right thing and get prepared. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That was really tremendous. And I must say, Hong Kong has endured typhoon after typhoon. And although this is unprecedented, as you can see, Hong Kong's absolutely back to normal right after the last typhoon. But having said that, I think I'd like to just explore a little bit more this concept of really economic development, which in my mind is central to the world, but recognizing the realities of the need for security. And as you say, both are very, I don't even say very important, it's crucial. Both are crucial. And how do you balance the two? I think, frankly, may in fact lead much more to the internal dynamics of each country and the internal politics of the country, which means there, going back to your point, Charlene, is the complexity. Maybe that is the new complexity that has made the problem a lot more difficult to resolve. And maybe that is the heart of it. And what are your thoughts on that, Minister Liu? And how might we make some headway on this particular issue when it gets to the need for domestic debate and domestic politics?
It's a good question. As I said, Chinese government has always focused on our development at home, but we need actually a secure environment for that. That's for all the countries. That's the case for all the countries. I know that this is something that we have to struggle with, but we have to bear in mind that it's just natural. Each country will prioritize its own national security. Then we have to have a framework set up in accordance with the multilateral framework that could cover the concern in a balanced way of all parties concerned. I don't know whether I'm right. Maybe Ambassador Barshevsky could correct me, because it's unfortunate that today, even today, in WTO rules, we do not have an agreed concept of what's the national security. So that becomes an issue, and we have already seen so many practices of abuse of this concept in trying to setting up more and more barriers for the facilitation of free trade and investment. So my suggestion would be that, of course, everyone cares about itself, but we need a multilateral framework, a real multilateral framework to work on that.
Very well said. I mean, I can't agree more. I think that may be a topic that we will take up on the panel next, because what's very close to my heart is what about the future of the multilateral system in the midst of all this? It seemed to have been swept off the table. I mean, that to me is the crucial issue. And that may, in fact, provide a way forward for the future, even for the bilateral relation. But let me now turn to you, President Tashish. And thank you very much for, making your way all the way to this part of the world and from Serbia. And your past record and history and your contributions to Serbia and to the European Union, so on, has really been immense, and we really are honored by your presence. I think the thing that is stuck most in my mind is, in the midst of this bilateral relationship that we're discussing, Serbia has managed to really develop a strong relationship with the US and a strong relationship with China. Now, that to me is a very important thing to explore. How do you do that, And what were some of the issues that you had to deal with? And that really raises the issue in my mind, is this bilateral relationship, as important as it is to US and China, is actually crucial to the rest of the world. And I think you're really, in my mind, speaking in a sense for the rest of the world. How do you see this bilateral relationship as it's developed, and what about the future of this bilateral relations and it impacts your country and your world?
Thank you. I'm really honored to have the opportunity to participate in such important forum organized by Yusuf, and I want to congratulate the organizers for everything what they've done, because I consider such relations most important to China and US in global arena nowadays. And I remember when I was young and growing up in Yugoslavia in that time, and that was my country where I was born. In that time, domination was and the conflict between USSR and United States. And our reaction in that time, the leadership of Yugoslavia in that time, was to work on founding non-aligned movement. That was the way how we reacted on Cold War and the conflict between USSR and United States. And non-aligned movement was very important in multilateral institutions that we are mentioning right now. But multilateralism is somehow day by day dying. We don't see influence of multilateral institutions in the world nowadays. And I see that as one of the most important threats to our common civilization. When I became a president of Serbia, we've been facing with a lot of challenges. That was just 5 years after being in the war against NATO. NATO was bombing Serbia in that time, 1999. And one of the most significant moments in that horrible war was dismantling Chinese embassy. I was living in that time 900 meters far from the Chinese embassy, and that was a night I was facing with a real problem. And but nowadays I'm asking myself whether someone can imagine that NATO or some big power is bombing Chinese embassy. This is not possible. This is only 25 years after this event, and this is crystal clear evidence that how things are changing very fast, and we are living in fundamentally, totally different world. And your question was how we can imagine the world in the future. What is going to be with us in next 25 years? What about trading, economy, technology, bilateral relations, multilateral relations? And we need right now a kind of expertise in politics which is characterized by vision. It's very important. And to work on creating pavement towards such a world with concrete steps. As a president of Serbia in that time, I was thinking what to do because that was 5 years after bombing. Serbia aspired to become member state of European Union. We are European countries. We are European culture. We are a small country. After dismantling former Yugoslavia, we've been 9 million people after living in a country with 23 with a significant international influence. And I thought about perspective. And I was president who established the policy, foreign policy, multi-vectors policy. I said, okay, we are going towards European Union. This is our main goal, but we have an interest to have extremely close relations with the United States, Russia, and China. I signed strategic partnership with the president of China in that time, Hu Jintao. Right now, we have a comprehensive strategic partnership between two countries. We have significant investments from China in Serbia. We are one of the cornerstone of Chinese political and economic relations with Eastern European countries. Some of them are member states of European Union, some of them are aspiring to become member states of European Union. And this is how we are contributing to the multilateralism in our corner of the world. Many people were asking me, how you are signing strategic partnership with China? Such a small country, Serbia, 9 million people, 1.5 billion people, China. But I told them, we are strategic partners in this small corner of the world, Southeast Europe. That was our attempt of a contribution to our relations. And before we came here, when I was aware about our topics, I said to explain Serbian relations with China and the United States is how to survive in between two elephants, big animals. And this is really something like that. But if I may say what I see as a main problem we are facing with the experience of the former leader of the very small country. Despite of the disputes in economy, in security, one of the main problems I see is a lack of understanding. Lack of understanding is in fact a real threat. Not only in terms of bilateral relations, China and United States. Lack of understanding is a real threat for our common world. China is a not best possible player in explaining about Chinese desires and strategy. United States for many, many centuries starting to analyze the rest of the world from the podium of, let me say, arrogancy. Because the United States consider themselves as the biggest power. They are still the biggest economic power and military power in the world, controlling 48% of the military capacities in the global arena. But the world in which we've been existing all together is not existing anymore. This is past. And this is not world of the domination. Few weeks ago, I was watching the video, fantastic dialogue between two extremely intelligent people, Professor Misheimer from Chicago University and Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University. I like them. I know them. I'm working with them. I'm talking with them. And Misheimer has explained, we have, as United States, interest to keep our domination. And the main threat for us is China. Jeffrey Sachs have said, The main threat from the United States is not China, is a new technology. Nuclear power and a new technology. Totally different views. Two, from my point of view, after Kissinger, most respected intellectuals in political arena in the United States. But totally different view. And I was thinking, what about Chinese considering the world nowadays? What we have is such a dialogue between extremely intelligent Chinese intellectuals, political intellectuals, and how they are going to define the world and the main threats for the world nowadays. And I see that communication between Chinese and American intellectuals and politicians are very weak. I don't know about economic sphere. Do we have a real dialogue with your partners or competitors in the United States? Yes. But we don't have a communication. We have a problem how to explain our desires, our interests, and we are living in a so vulnerable world. So I'm witnessing, I'm pretty old, but I'm witnessing the development of the world. I think this is the moment, the most vulnerable in past 7 decades, 8 decades, and one of the most dangerous moments in our common history. And in that respect, lack of understanding and the problem in communication can bring us in a conflict which can destroy whole world. And I'm talking about this because many people are talking about Taiwan, South China Sea, Eastern China Sea, United States, Pacific, Donald Trump, Xi Jinping. But I have to underline lack of understanding and very bad communication is one of the most difficult threats. That's what I consider very important.
Thank you so much, President Tadish. I mean, you first of all have spoken what is in the minds and hearts of a lot of countries outside of US and China. You know, this idea that we need to look after ourselves at the same time within this world, which is dominated by, you know, 2 elephants. And then also, you know, the crying out loud for, please don't make us choose. And how do we maintain that balance and really strike our own path? And I thank you for, you know, voicing that, you know, really for those countries in that part of the world. And I think what you said about lack of understanding and the need for engagement, in a sense, you have actually put in front of us now the spirit of this conference. Why are we here? We're here because we'd like to do something about addressing that very issue that you're talking about. I think I have a lot of hope for the future of the relations if we're able to continue that dialogue, that engagement, and try to take away that lack of understanding. So may I ask you, President, you have any concrete ideas about how we can actually increase the engagement and maybe involving not just US and China, because forever that'll be a kind of a, you know, hopefully not developing into a zero-sum game, but it will be a lot of, you know, back and forth. But what about the participation of third countries like yourself and other third countries?
I think this is, that can be useful. I mean, Serbia on the West was considered not the Western country. We are Europeans, but they always said, you are different Europeans. Yes, we are. We are, and I'm proud of that. I like it. And we talked before, with Joseph, we talked about before this conference, and he underlined that he's owning the basketball team in the United States. And
the New York Nets.
Yeah, he mentioned that the best player is Serbian guy, Nikola Jokic nowadays, and coming from a very small country, which is playing in a totally different way. He's not playing with the rules of NBA, but he's the best for 4 years. He's a game changer. And maybe we can be game changer. We can be game changer. And now I'm going to try to explain how I see situation. First of all, I fully agree with the Jeffrey Sachs, who have said, we have an ocean between us. Keep distance. If we are not keeping distance, we are coming to the high-risky situation. Do you know why? When two frigates and the ships, military, are approaching to each other, the commanders are calling alert. If we are approaching to each other in an unpredictable way, by no announcing to each other we are coming, this is extremely dangerous. First of all, let's define the rules. Keep distance, because we have a they have a military weapon, they have nuclear bombs, they can destroy the world. Second, let's think about not only China and the United States, but also other big powers, for example, Russia, and their interests, and let's try to respect also Russian interests, and to consider that interest in the wider context. And India, which is coming to the podium to be global power. And also, let's think about Iran, Turkey, South Africa, and Brazil. They are going to be also significant powers in the period ahead of us. If we are ignoring interests of other countries, if we are trying to continue domination, this is not functioning, this is not working. This is not working. Everyone can destroy the whole world who has a nuclear power. And this is why I think that we have to have a totally different strategy. And finally, I'm finishing with it. We are human beings. We are not perfect. We have a kind of problems, always. We are beautiful, human beings are beautiful, but also we are able to destroy the world. And what is one of the worst characteristic of our human beings? Stereotypes and prejudices. We are full of stereotypes and prejudices. In the context of lack of understanding, this is disaster. The Western world is analyzing China as a kind of alien. I want to congratulate and to thank Ambassador and Henry Kissinger and everyone from the United States who has been working on making closer relations. But still, we have such prejudices. I'm every month in China. I'm lecturing on Chinese universities. I'm trying to be interlocutor. And I see also kind of prejudices. But lack of understanding is crucially important. I remember always a book of the Huntington Clash of Civilization. We are living in the clash of civilization. But the other book, which was very important, Fukuyama, The End of History. Come on, this is beginning of history. This is not the end of history. This is really beginning of history. This is totally different moment. Who is not understanding that is the enemy of the future of the mankind. And I think that we need more political expertise, we need more experts in political spectrum, and the people that can, like you, organize such a conferences everywhere. I'm participating in different forums. I'm going from here to Bangladesh on Bengali forum. I see my friend, Prime Minister Yunus is going to deliver his speech, and also my friend Jose Ramos Horta, Nobel Prize winner, fantastic person who established peace between Indonesia and Timor-Leste. After that, I'm going to be on COP29 in Baku about global warming, which is also a threat for all of us. And after that, Alliance of Civilization in Lisbon, that is going to be also opportunity to talk about this relation. With your permission, I'm going to talk about this conference. But whenever we are talking with each other on some conferences, we have to take into the consideration the most important relations between China and the United States. And such conferences, I think more conferences like this is helpful. More expertise, more interlocutors, this is very, very important. I mean, this is only way how we can find practical solutions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, President. This is right on the mark. And I really thank you personally for everything that you're doing, and very thankful that you're really part of the cause that we at CUSIF, the China-US Exchange Foundation is trying to actually do in that dialogue. And really thank you for that. You know, and what you've also mentioned, this idea of, you know, to begin to unscramble this entanglement between economics and security. Maybe the first step is rules of engagement on the security side that would actually, hopefully, allow some stability and ring fencing, if that's the right word, of the security issue so we can really focus on the economic. And maybe the first step towards that are sort of multilateral agreement on the rules of engagement on the security side. And that, I think, you know, is the remark really made a lot of impact on me, because everybody is dealing with how do you unscramble this entanglement between security and development. So may I now turn to you, Joe. Change of pace. Let's put on our businessman's hat, talk about the economics. You know, I don't want us to just focus on geopolitics and sweep away, which I think is the big elephant in the room. What the hell do we do about the economy? You know, that's ultimately people's livelihood and what's really important to all of us at the end of the day. So from your standpoint, Joe, you know, you're one of the, you know, really most important businessmen in this region, if not the world, and you've seen it all. How are you handling this? And especially from your perspective, not any specifics, but from generally from the perspective of a new factor that's introduced into this whole equation in my mind is how fast technology is developing globally, how it impacts the business, the economy, and how it impacts security, to be honest. What is your perspective? And really, please, put on a businessman's hat. How do you see this? How do you work your company in the midst of what we have discussed up to now?
Yeah, Victor, thank you so much for the question. And I do want to thank CUSEF for giving me the opportunity to exchange views in front of such distinguished guests and also a very distinguished panel here. Before I address your question, Victor, I do want to echo something that President Tadich have said about the lack of communication and lack of understanding. I'm from Taiwan. I was born and raised in Taiwan with parents originally from Shanghai. And so on the issue of Taiwan, it's something that is absolutely important for the Chinese people and the Chinese government. I still remember Dr. Henry Kissinger once said that you know, before the normalization of relationships between the United States and China, the two countries met, the representatives from the two countries met 160 times on the issue of Taiwan. And there have been 3 joint communiques on that particular issue. So I have to ask today, people that are in the American government, how many of them actually have understand this history and have read the communiques? And that's, I'm saying that because a lot of understanding is based on history, based on the historical development. I would say today's position of China on Taiwan has not changed, and it's derived from those discussions and those communiques. So I say that to say that the understanding has to be, people really have to go back to history. And I think it's quite relevant that we're going back to 45 years of history. But before, I want to address the technology question specifically, but the 45 years has been relevant to Alibaba for the last 25 years. I can't say 45 because we've only existed for 25 years, founded in 1999. And in fact, the first website that Alibaba has developed was in English language. It is in English language because it was a site for us to put all the information of Chinese manufacturers on the site for people who want to source globally. Americans, Europeans, people who want to buy manufactured products. And it was back in 1999, really on the cusp of China entering the WTO in 2001. And thank to Ambassador Barshevsky, who worked so hard to make that happen. Alibaba flourished because of the WTO, because you literally have millions and millions of small businesses, small factories in China that can now directly export to the United States and to the rest of the world. And that was because of the China's entry into the WTO. And since those times, I have seen China evolve from a manufacturing base, and today it is still a manufacturing powerhouse because China still has the largest population of most industrious people and highly educated people. But we have evolved, China has evolved from being a manufacturing base to now also the world's largest consumer market. And again, you think Alibaba is a consumer shopping website because of Taobao. But Taobao didn't really take off until 10 years after we started that import-export website. So I've tracked the development of China's development is very much supporting and underlies the development of Alibaba today. And today, by all counts, there's about 400 million middle-class consumers in China that want to buy, that want to consume. They want to buy from all over the world. And that's the opportunity for a lot of companies. And Mr. B has talked about American companies, 80,000 American companies doing business in China, and 90% of them are profitable. The last time I checked, American companies make over $10 billion US dollars of operating profits in China. And it's a very, very good symbiotic relationship between China and the United States. So that's the backdrop because I'm just looking at it from my own Alibaba experience. Your question about technology, it's actually one of the most difficult issues to address. And that's because technology has become the flashpoint of tension between the United States and China. From the United States standpoint, the rise of China as an economic power is, they're fearful of it, but specifically the technology, they're fearful that technology will drive further economic gains. And from China's perspective, all the restrictions that's been put in place today, for example, export restrictions on high-end chips and things like that, is really an excuse to slow down China, right? So both sides have very different perspectives on the same issue. What I think what needs to be done is, rather than focusing on technology as the flashpoint, I hope that the next set of conversations between China and the United States can focus on some of the not direct issues, because technology is direct. NVIDIA chips cannot be exported to China. That's a bilateral issue. But I think the conversation can start with multilateral issues. We have trouble spots in the world. There's Russia, Ukraine, there's Israel, Iran. In those areas, both countries have common interests. And if the conversation can start with, get people getting together and figuring out how do we resolve some of these hot conflicts, rather than focusing on the trade or tariffs, or the trade, tariffs, technology restrictions are bilateral issues. But I think maybe there are trouble spots in the world that are even more important to resolve than focused on these flashpoints.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'm so glad you're able to give that perspective. Because as I said earlier, I think at the end of the day, I'm biased, but it's about economics and people's livelihood. And we've got to bring ourselves back to that. But on the question of technology, I mean, you're the expert, and I can't agree with you more. You know, I think perhaps one way of thinking through this and making it not a flashpoint, which it is really to still think about not only bilateral, but on a multilateral basis, how we can all work together to apply technology to solve some of the big problems in the world today, like poverty and the reconstruction of old industries, provide more jobs, and importantly, on the climate issue. So if we can turn this flashpoint of technology not into just advancing the state of the art, if that's the way to put it, and applying it to military use, think about applying that technology to actually civilian use and how to make the world better. And that, I think, is a common goal and could be a focal point for the future of multilateral discussions. But anyway, thank you very much for that. Time is really marching on, so I think I'm going to wrap up the panel by really talking now about the other part of our agenda, which is what about the next 45 years, but very quickly, because of lack of time. One theme that's ran through all your discussions is, at the back of my mind is, what about the future of multilateralism? How can we think about this bilateral relationship in the context of the multilateral system, not just in isolation? So maybe, and I will start with Charlene and then go, maybe you can just give a 1-minute thing on what you think about the future, the next 45 years. And Charlene, take a little more time because I'd like you to give your views on the multilateral. You're the expert here.
I think the multilateral system faces extraordinary challenge, and those challenges have been evident for at least a generation. Multilateral system is very slow. It is behind. It took 10 years for the Uruguay round of global negotiations to conclude. The Doha round of global communications has never concluded. We're approaching year 25. It took 13 years to reach a subsidies agreement on fisheries and the depletion of fishing resources. And that agreement, because that seemed controversial to many members of the WTO, was itself watered down. 13 years for half an agreement. So, and technology, of course, is a blip in the WTO. Agriculture and commodities remain the largest sectors of focus. So the system is antiquated, it is old, it is a generation behind the times, it is unwieldy, and because unanimity is required, any one country can raise its hand to say, I don't think so, not today, and the negotiations stop. Needs to be revamped. There needs to be an executive committee. There needs to be a complete rethink of how the system should work, because otherwise there is no multilateral trade forum that is usable.
I think that's tremendous, Charlene. I think as much as we have worked in the old system, we have to admit that we really need a new multilateral system. And maybe the solution to that is also a way of actually doing something about the bilateral relations and kind of put it in the context of a new multilateralism and a totally different perspective on how that bilateral relationship can develop. So how about the next 45 years for the bilateral? Just a quick thought.
45.
Where do you think it's going to go? How are you going to make it better?
I think it's impossible to say. 45 years ago, would you have thought China would be where China is today? 45 years ago, would you believe you are where you are today? So I think it's very hard to hypothesize The only thing I would say is that for countries, if you are resilient economically, resilient in terms of security, resilient in terms of the cohesiveness of your society, then the next 45 years, the good and the bad, will wash out. But if you're not resilient, if you are divided, if you are incapable of lending security to your national aspirations and to individual aspirations, then you are in reactive mode. Then the world buffets you around, and the result is improvisational reaction, improvisational relationships, absolute instability. So for my money, the next 45 years ought to focus on resiliency.
Can't agree more. And resiliency in generational terms, and not react to the current happening here and there. Right. Minister Liu.
1 minute.
1 minute thought on the next 45 years on the bilateral relations.
Of course, we wish for good, and as many of my colleagues here mentioned, I think it's very important to enhance the mutual knowledge, mutual understanding of each other. As I just mentioned in my opening remark, I think Chinese people still believe that it's our legitimate right to equal development, I mean economic, in economy, in science and technology, whatever. So in that way, we still prefer that we have good partners. Then we should come into the question why there is a misunderstanding. For our part, we are still eager to carry out or go through this kind of very meaningful discussion with our American interlocutors to find why they are very suspicious about Chinese ambitions, what China is going to do with our growing power, our growing economy. So long as we are addressing the real benefits of our two publics, we still believe in, some of my colleagues here on the panel already mentioned that, we still believe in that zero-sum mentality is not a way out. We still believe in that China and the US, if we could work together and with our international partners, we could create a bigger pie that everybody could have a bigger share. So that's my wish for the prospect.
Thank you. Very well said. President Tadish?
We need a new world orders. But who is going to establish new orders, new world orders? The big powers member state of the National Security Council of United Nations. We cannot imagine that Serbia is going to establish new world orders. But disputes and totally different interests are characterizing the relations between big powers. Look, Russia and the United States. Situation is disaster. What about European Union? Where is European Union? Is European Union only to follow United States policy or not? Few weeks ago, I was writing an article in which I was asking whether the United States are going to follow also totally different policy of is European Union going to follow strictly United States policy if Trump is going to win? Because Trump is coming. And we cannot expect that, we are not expecting that it's going to be full continuation with the policy of Democrats. But nowadays, a disaster situation among the European Union leaders. And my question is, who is going to establish new world orders? I don't have an answer on that question. But without multilateralism, we don't have a cooperation. Without cooperation, we are going to be in a most difficult situation. This is the main issue. We cannot count only on bilateral relations. This is why I think this is the new challenge we are facing with. This is about multilateralism. What about to reestablish United Nations system? This is our common goal.
Thank you. Encasing the future in terms of a new world order, a new multilateralism, may in fact be the way to converge and not play the way the zero-sum game is going to lead us. So, last but not least, Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, the next 45 years, I'll answer in terms of technology. Right now, the direction is decoupling between the two countries in terms of technology. If you look at AI and all this, maybe it'll last maybe the next 5 years. But if you look at over the next 45 years, I think this decoupling is going to reverse for two reasons. Number one, it's very expensive and it takes very long to develop key technologies. And there should be a division of responsibility in terms of some technologies where the countries can collaborate together. It would be less costly that way. And number two, the United States and China are not the only countries in the world. There are third-party countries. So they're not going to choose, I only use American technology or I only use Chinese technology. They're going to stay neutral and find the best of breed technology. And so at some point, this trend of decoupling, people will realize it's just silly. And people need to work together on that.
Bravo. I think that is absolutely the way to end this morning's session. I think really we've had a wonderful time, and all that's left for me to do as your moderator is to thank our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much, and thank you.
If you all could please stay on stage for a group photo. Please stay on stage for a group photo. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Dr. Victor Fung, to Ambassador Barjewski, to Vice Minister Lu Kang, President Tadic, and of course Mr. Zhou Cai for enlightening us with that high-level conversation. It is a tradition of the Hong Kong Forum that each year, starting last year, we have had the ambassadors of both countries address this audience. We'll be hearing from Ambassador Nicholas Burns, but we'll be hearing first from His Excellency Ambassador谢锋. He is from Jiangsu. He served as ambassador to Indonesia. Of course, many people remember him from his time here in Hong Kong when he served here as the Foreign Ministry's commissioner. And before his current posting to Washington, he was Vice Foreign Minister of China. Please welcome His Excellency Ambassador谢锋.
Chairman Jiang Zhao, Chairman Bi Jingquan, Vice Minister Lu Kang, President Boris Tadic, Chair Charlene Barjewski, Ambassador Nicholas Burns, Ambassador Max Baucus, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It gives me great pleasure to join you in Hong Kong virtually. From 2017 to 2021, I had the honor to serve as Commissioner of the Foreign Ministry of China in the Hong Kong SAR. Time flies. That has been nearly 4 years since I left. But I still hold fond memories of my friends there. So first of all, let me extend my warm congratulations to the successful opening of the US-China Hong Kong Forum, and also my best wishes to friends old and new. As we mark the 45th anniversary of China-US diplomatic relations, and as the US presidential election has drawn to an end, the theme of this year's forum, reflection and forecast, is highly relevant. History, if not forgotten, can serve as a guide for the future. Over the years, the China-US relationship has traveled an extraordinary journey, bringing tremendous dividends of peace, stability, and development to both countries and the world. History tells us that when China and the United States work together, we can make a big difference. We confront one another. Turbulence division and disaster would ensue. Going forward, the relationship is again at a new historical starting point. Both our peoples and the world are watching closely where it will head. President Xi Jinping has called for joint efforts to enhance dialogue and communication, properly manage differences, expand mutually beneficial cooperation, and find the right way for China and the United States to get along with each other in the new era. A stable, sound, and sustainable China-US relationship is in our common interests, and mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation represent the right path to take. The two sides need to strengthen dialogue and communication. We are the world's two largest economies, permanent members of the UN Security Council, and nuclear power states. Turning our back on each other is not an option. Conflict or confrontation would have consequences neither side can afford. In Chinese culture, we believe whenever there is an issue, the best way forward is to sit down and talk it through. While China and the United States each have our own concerns, we can well put the issues on the table, have candid communication, and find a solution through equal-footed consultation. It would be ridiculous if the very word dialogue should become a taboo, which would mean a chilling return to the Cold War era estrangement and confrontation. The two sides need to let dialogue and win-win results define our interactions, not confrontation or zero-sum mentality. We need to enhance dialogue at various levels and in various fields, eliminating misunderstanding and miscalculation, expand common interests, and foster closer ties between our two peoples, so as to inject fresh impetus into China-US relations. China is always open to dialogue. We welcome more exchanges between our peoples, and we are willing to be partners and friends of the United States. We hope the US side will also move with us in the same direction. The two sides need to properly manage differences. Time has changed. Past tragedies of major country conflict should not be allowed to repeat. It is important to ensure the giant ship of the China-US relationship will not lose direction or speed, still less having a collision. As a Chinese saying goes, the finer details will fall into places when they are aligned with the bigger picture. We need to view and handle China-US relations from a strategic and long-term perspective. China has no plan to overtake or displace the United States. We hope the US side will also have no intention to contain or suppress China. We need to focus more on our common interests instead of being preoccupied by differences and allowing them to dominate the headlines. We need to respect each other's core interests and major concerns, properly manage differences in a constructive manner, and minimize negative factors. The Taiwan question is at the very core of China's core interests and is the bedrock of the political foundation of China-US relations. If mishandled, it could be the biggest flashpoint that may trigger conflict and confrontation. Any forces trying to play Taiwan as a card would be playing with fire. To truly uphold peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, one should commit to the One China principle and the 3 Sino-US joint communiques in both word and deed, and unequivocally oppose Taiwan independence. The two sides also need to expand mutually beneficial cooperation. China-US cooperation is never a zero-sum game, nor a one-way street where one party gets all the benefits. Otherwise, how could our economic cooperation grow to the current size? Economically, our total trade has exceeded $660 billion, and over 70,000 American companies are doing business in China, earning a profit of $50 billion annually. In terms of employment, exports to China alone support 930,000 jobs in the United States. In terms of livelihood, Chinese products have not only offered American consumers more choices, but also lowered costs for them. The Chinese investment has not only created more jobs in the United States, but also bolstered local economies. Our interests are so deeply intertwined that decoupling and disrupting supply chains do not make economic sense and simply will not work. Trade war or tech war is a double-edged sword. Why should anyone opt for something that serves nobody's interests? The earth is big enough for China and the United States to develop respectively and prosper together. Our two countries should be a boost, not an obstacle to each other's development. From traditional areas like economy and trade, agriculture and energy, to emerging challenges such as AI and public health, the two sides enjoy vast room for mutually beneficial cooperation. Dear friends, throughout the decades, with the courage and wisdom of both sides, the China-US relationship has braved wind and rain and forged ahead against all odds. Today, we need to set out again. The two sides should and can find the right way to get along on this planet. To do that, the support from people from both countries, including all of you here, is indispensable. I would like to thank the China-United States Exchange Foundation for its important contribution to promoting bilateral exchanges and cooperation over all these years. Hong Kong has unique strengths as it enjoys backing of the motherland and is open to the world, and has restored order and is set to thrive. The interests of Hong Kong and the United States are also deeply interconnected. Therefore, a prosperous and stable Hong Kong serves the common interests of China and the United States. Let's work together to seize opportunities and remove disruptions, so as to let Hong Kong shine brighter as an international financial, trading and shipping center, and usher in a better future for the Pole of the Orient. Thank you very much.
We thank very much Ambassador谢锋for his address. And now the United States Ambassador Nicholas Burns was, of course, a spokesperson for the US Department of State and ambassador to NATO. He really has become known as an international relations scholar and also diplomat, and is currently on leave from the Harvard Kennedy School while he serves in Beijing. And during that time he's been serving in Beijing, he really has come across as a real champion for people to people and bringing all those people, that alliance of 1.8 billion people, together. Please welcome His Excellency Ambassador Nicholas Burns.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Beijing. I'd like to begin by thanking the chairman of the China-US Exchange Foundation, John Zhao, and the vice chairman of the China Center for International Economic Exchanges, Bi-Jing Chuan, for the invitation to speak with you this morning. I also want to greet my friends and colleagues at our Consulate General in Hong Kong, my friend Consul General Greg May and his team, my predecessor and friend, former Ambassador Max Baucus, the great U.S. Trade Representative Charlene Barshevsky, who played such a major role in this relationship, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for China and Taiwan, Rick Waters, who was a close colleague of mine when he was in the U.S. government. There are many distinguished participants attending this forum. I'd like to also acknowledge, of course, my counterpart in Washington, Ambassador谢锋, who spoke to you just now. I wish I could be with you in person, but due to the press of business, I had to remain here in Beijing. I was very pleased to meet some of you when I visited Hong Kong in March of this year, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about the U.S.-China relationship. It is obviously a complicated relationship, and one that is, at its core, competitive. Over 45 years of diplomatic relations, we've seen our relationship evolve, certainly into the most consequential bilateral relationship of any in the world. That global significance makes it absolutely critical that we manage our relationship and our competition in a responsible way and peacefully. And that's why we spent the past 18 months engaged in extraordinarily intense diplomacy between our government and the government in Beijing. to restore the channels both of our governments needed to communicate and to manage our differences. I'm pleased to report that, thanks to the tremendous work on both sides, that effort has largely succeeded. After months of very little high-level communication between our governments in 2023, we had Secretary Blinken visit Beijing in the middle part of that year. We saw a series of high-level engagements from Secretary Janet Yellen, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Podesta, Secretary Raimondo. They all came to China over the last 18 months. The Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer of the Senate, led a bipartisan congressional delegation to China, to Shanghai and Beijing, the first in 5 years. And China's officials came to the United States. Director Wang Yi met with President Biden and Secretary Blinken about a year ago. And Minister of Commerce Wang Wentao also came to meet with Secretary Raimondo and Ambassador Catherine Tai. This all culminated, as you know, in the Woodside Summit roughly 1 year ago when President Biden and President Xi met outside of San Francisco. Thanks to all these efforts, we've seen progress on some areas of cooperation. We've resumed military-to-military communications, something that's critically important for our two militaries that operate in such close proximity to each other in the South and East China Seas. Our presidents also agreed to cooperate in attacking the scourge of fentanyl, the leading cause of death in American society. Together, we've taken important steps to reduce the flow of dangerous precursor chemicals to the cartels in Mexico and Central America, but much more work is needed. We're also tackling climate change, which our two countries have a shared responsibility to address as the largest carbon emitters in the world. And we've established various working groups on commercial, economic, financial, and agricultural issues, and we established an information exchange on export controls enforcement. Last but not least, both President Biden and President Xi committed to strengthening people-to-people ties. These bilateral engagements allow for conversations that, while are often quite difficult, they help drive down the probability that competition veers into conflict. They also demonstrate our commitment to managing this relationship responsibly. Because competition remains the defining feature of the relationship, the U.S. and China are strategic competitors. And I expect our relationship will remain fiercely competitive for many years. We have major differences that we must address. Despite decades of reform and opening, the PRC still discriminates against American businesses and investors. We want to see progress on intellectual property and an end to forced technology transfers, unfair subsidies, and other measures that tilt the playing field against American companies in China. We're deeply concerned with the after effects of the counterespionage law, the amended state secrets law, and other recent measures. These efforts to effectively criminalize corporate due diligence and the sharing of routine economic data increase risk, and they undermine China's investment climate. On trade, Beijing is trying to restore its economic growth by investing in even more manufacturing capacity. This strategy relies on Beijing trading partners absorbing a flood of underpriced exports at the expense of our own workers and our own businesses. We have an obligation to American businesses, particularly in manufacturing, to prevent a second China shock. That is why President Biden, quite rightly, raised tariffs on Chinese EVs, lithium batteries, and other technologies. And on the subject of technology, as we've made clear time and again, we will ensure that American technology, capital, and know-how are not used to undermine U.S. national security. We cannot and will not compromise on this point. We will also never back down from promoting our core interests and values, sanctioning Chinese companies exporting dual-use technologies to support Putin's illegal war in Ukraine, promoting freedom of navigation and the rule of international law in the South China Sea, and defending our ally, the Philippines, from illegal and ill-advised Chinese aggression, and arguing that the PRC should commit to a peaceful resolution of differences in the Taiwan Strait. We want to advance our deep and cherished commitment to human rights and human freedoms in Xinjiang, Tibet, and yes, in Hong Kong itself. We have many critical differences with China. I want to be equally clear, however, that the United States is not seeking to decouple from China. As Secretary Janet Yellen has rightly said, decoupling would be a disaster for both of our economies. While bilateral trade has declined over the past 2 years after a record-setting 2022, the PRC remains our third largest trading partner, and we are the PRC's top trading partner ourselves. We want healthy, fair, two-way trade and investment to continue. Our de-risking measures are serious and warranted and very important, but we do want to see trade and investment continue in the great bulk of our current economic relationship. Our approach contrasts sharply, by the way, with the PRC's broad, opaque, and highly restrictive controls on high-tech exports, data, and both inbound and outbound investment. So again, our relationship is competitive and will remain competitive for many years to come, but we are now better connected and better able to manage that competition between the two governments in a responsible way. As we mark the 45th anniversary of U.S.-China diplomatic relations, it is fitting that you are honoring two great leaders, and thank you for doing this, honoring President Jimmy Carter and honoring our former Secretary of State, the late Henry Kissinger. Thank you for doing that because, much like today, historical complexities in geopolitics shaped the U.S.-China relationship when it entered the modern phase 45 years ago. Despite differing politics, both President Carter and Secretary Kissinger, and I must say, led, of course, by President Nixon, shared the conviction that the U.S.-China relationship was critically important. Driven by this conviction, both President Carter and Secretary Kissinger helped establish the foundation for our contemporary diplomatic and economic relationship. So I'd like to join you in recognizing the important contributions they made, both of them, to the U.S.-China relationship. And it is in that spirit that I would note that our two governments have an obligation to manage the bilateral relationship in an effective way. But it is the Chinese and American people from all walks of life, students, business people, young professionals, musicians, artists, athletes, academics, they're the ballast in the ties between our two countries. As we look to 2025, we in U.S. Mission China will work to support the incoming administration of President-elect Donald Trump to help he and his new team to succeed in this complicated, complex, and yet vital relationship with China. We held an election watch party at our embassy in Beijing to observe the results of the election last week. I told the hundreds of Chinese guests who were present that you can't call yourself a democracy if you don't allow citizens to vote their leaders in or out. As the American ambassador here in China, I was never so proud to see the American people exercising their sacred right to vote. The right to vote is the keystone of our democracy, and our democracy is surely the best and most just form of government in the world today, as it will continue to be for the future. So thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. I hope you have candid, productive discussions. I wish you all the best for your time in Hong Kong. Xie xie nin.
Our deep appreciation and best wishes to Ambassador Nicholas Burns speaking to us there from Beijing. So we had the high-level dialogue, and now 10 days after the United States presidential election, this opening panel takes a deep dive into the implications of those outcomes, the likely China policy of the next American leader, and how this could shape the conditions for security, the economy, and of course, shared global challenges. This is going to be a fantastic discussion and will be moderated by Professor Da Wei, who is the Director of the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University. And joining him on this panel is Ambassador Max Baucus, the longest-serving senator from Montana and the 11th U.S. ambassador to China. Joining us online will be Christopher Nixon Cox, who is a board director of the Richard Nixon Foundation, but also here with us in person is Ambassador Cui Tiankai, the former Vice Foreign Minister of China, and of course for 8 years the Ambassador of China in Washington. We also have, and we're delighted to welcome to this forum, Ambassador Nirupama Rao, who we knew from Beijing. She was India's ambassador to China and then became India's ambassador to the United States, and then served as the 28th Foreign Secretary of India. And of course, Rick Waters, the Managing Director of Eurasia Group, and the former United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. We welcome all of you to this stage and this conversation.